Snow fell like whispered secrets across Manhattan, each flake catching streetlight and headlamps before melting into the black asphalt of Park Avenue. December 24th came early to the city this year. Darkness settling over glass towers by 4 in the afternoon, wrapping the financial district in winter's premature twilight. Inside the 72nd floor of Blackwell Capital Group, Garrett Blackwell closed his laptop with the finality of a man ending one chapter to begin another. 3 years he'd been doing this. 3 years of leaving the office early on Christmas Eve, fighting the guilt that climbed his throat like bile every time he remembered the year he hadn't. The year Catherine called twice while he negotiated terms with investors in Singapore. Her voice bright on the first message, strained on the second. The year she drove home alone from his mother's house in Connecticut, with 3-year-old Lily sleeping in the back seat, Christmas presents stacked in the trunk. The year a drunk driver ran a red light on the Merritt Parkway and turned his wife into a memory. Garrett stood at the window now, watching snow transform the city into something softer than it had any right to be. His reflection stared back, tall frame still holding the discipline of college rowing, dark hair showing gray at the temples. Steel gray eyes that people said could read a balance sheet or a lie with equal precision. 38 years old and the youngest CEO to build a $2.3 billion portfolio in the firm's history. Yet none of it mattered when he remembered Catherine's second voicemail, the one the police played back to him in the hospital waiting room, while Lily underwent surgery for a fractured collarbone and his wife lay 3 floors down in the morgue. His phone buzzed. Thomas, his driver, confirming the car was ready downstairs. Garrett grabbed his coat, a charcoal cashmere that Catherine had bought him their last Christmas together, and headed for the elevator. The office was empty except for security and the cleaning crew, everyone else having fled hours ago to whatever traditions defined their holidays. His own tradition was simple hot chocolate from the cart on 68th Street, the one that used real cream and Belgian chocolate, then home to Lily for dinner and her insistence on leaving cookies for Santa even though she'd stopped believing 2 years ago but wouldn't admit it. The elevator descended in smooth silence, floors ticking by in glowing numbers. Garrett checked his watch. 6:45. He'd promised Lily 7 o'clock, which meant he was cutting it close, but still within the acceptable margin. She'd learned to measure his promises in 15-minute increments, a skill no 6-year-old should need, but one that Catherine's death had taught her. Better late than never, she'd say. When he walked through the door at 7:30 instead of 7, her voice carrying more forgiveness than any adult had ever offered him. The lobby gleamed with marble and steel, a receptionist desk unmanned for the holiday. Garrett's footsteps echoed as he crossed to the revolving doors, pushing into the December night, where cold air hit his face like a baptism. Thomas waited at the curb, the black Mercedes idling, exhaust turning to fog in the frozen air. Traffic was brutal. Park Avenue had become a parking lot of taxis and delivery trucks, everyone trying to get somewhere important before the world shut down for Christmas. Garrett settled into the leather seat, thumbing through messages on his phone. Market summaries, year-end reports, a note from his brother Wyatt in Colorado complaining about the ski conditions. Nothing urgent, nothing that couldn't wait until Monday. They crawled north through the gridlock, past department stores with windows full of mechanical displays and crowds of last-minute shoppers clutching bags. At 68th Street, Thomas pulled over near the hot chocolate cart, a small operation run by an elderly man who'd been there every winter for as long as Garrett could remember. He stepped out cold, biting through his coat, and ordered 2 large cups with extra whipped cream. The vendor smiled, recognizing him. "For your little girl," Garrett nodded, watching steam rise from the cups. "She's lucky to have a father who remembers." The words landed harder than intended. Garrett paid, tipped heavily, and returned to the car with the hot chocolate warming his hands. Thomas merged back into traffic heading toward the penthouse on 72nd Street. They were stopped at a red light when Garrett saw her. A woman slumped against the brick wall of a service alley between a closed boutique and a darkened law office. She wore a thin dress summer fabric completely wrong for winter and no coat despite the temperature hovering near 12 degrees. Her feet were bare, pale skin already showing the blue-gray tinge of severe cold exposure. Snow accumulated on her shoulders like a burial shroud. Garrett's hand moved before his brain caught up, hitting the button to lower the partition. "Stop the car." Thomas glanced in the rearview mirror following Garrett's gaze. "Sir, there are shelters we could call." "Stop the car, now." The Mercedes pulled to the curb, hazard lights blinking. Garrett was out before Thomas could put it in park, hot chocolate forgotten on the seat. He crossed the sidewalk in 4 strides, kneeling beside the woman with the kind of urgency that made his chest tight. Up close, she was younger than he'd thought, mid-20s maybe, with dark blonde hair plastered to her skull by melting snow. Her lips had gone past blue into something closer to purple. Her breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps. Garrett checked her pulse at the wrist, weak, erratic, hypothermic. He'd seen this before the night his college roommate's younger sister wandered drunk into a blizzard after a party and wasn't found until morning. She'd survived barely, with frostbite claiming 3 toes and the tip of her nose. This woman wouldn't last another hour. He looked for identification, found nothing. No purse, no phone, no wallet. Her dress had a small stain near the hem, wine or blood, he couldn't tell. Then he noticed the paper, a square of white safety pinned to the fabric above her heart like a target. Garrett unpinned it with numb fingers, unfolding the note to read 4 lines of hurried handwriting. "Nobody's girl. You were a mistake I'm correcting. Don't try to find me. DK." Rage moved through Garrett's body like electricity. Someone had done this deliberately. Stripped her, left her, pinned a note to her like she was garbage being thrown away. His hands shook as he folded the paper and shoved it in his coat pocket. Evidence. This was evidence. Thomas appeared at his shoulder, taking in the scene with the practiced calm of a man who'd driven the wealthy through every crisis. "Sir, we should call 911. "No. Sir, they'll take her to Bellevue. She'll be processed as homeless, maybe Jane Doe if she doesn't have ID. By the time anyone asks questions, she could be dead from complications. We're taking her to my place. Call Dr. Sterling. Tell her it's an emergency hypothermia and I need her at the penthouse in 20 minutes. Thomas hesitated only a second before pulling out his phone. Garrett bent, sliding his arms under the woman's body. She weighed almost nothing, bones wrapped in skin and summer cotton. He lifted her against his chest, his coat falling open to cover her, and carried her to the car. Thomas had already opened the back door, spreading a blanket across the seat. Garrett laid her down, tucking the cashmere around her, and climbed in beside her to monitor her breathing. Thomas accelerated through traffic with the kind of urgency that came from 17 years of reading his employer's tone. The woman didn't stir, didn't open her eyes, gave no sign she knew she'd been moved. Garrett pressed 2 fingers to her neck, counting pulse beats. 42 per minute. Too low. Her skin felt like touching snow. They made it to 72nd Street in 8 minutes, Thomas pulling into the underground garage and killing the engine. Garrett lifted the woman again, carrying her toward the private elevator that serviced the penthouse. His mind was already working through logistics, Dr. Sterling for immediate treatment, then decisions about police, about whoever had left this woman to die, about how to explain this to Lily. Lily. His daughter would be upstairs right now, probably still in her Christmas pajamas, despite it being almost 7 o'clock, waiting by the window for his headlights. She'd see him carrying a stranger into their home and have questions he wasn't prepared to answer. But there wasn't a choice. There had never been a choice, not from the moment he'd seen the woman crumpled in that alley, because 3 years ago someone had chosen not to stop when Catherine needed help, and he'd carry that weight until his own death. The elevator rose in silence. Garrett watched the numbers climb 50, 60, 70, feeling the woman's breath against his chest, shallow but steady. The doors opened directly into the penthouse, a sprawling apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Central Park like a living painting. Snow had turned the park into something from a Christmas card, bare trees sketched in white against dark sky. City lights reflected on frozen pathways. Lily appeared from the hallway in an instant, her green eyes, Catherine's eyes, going wide. She wore red flannel pajamas covered in reindeer. Her brown curls pulled into a messy ponytail and clutched her stuffed reindeer Rudy against her chest like a shield. "Daddy, you're late. Santa's coming soon and we haven't—" She stopped mid-sentence, staring at the woman in Garrett's arms. "Who's that?" Garrett kept his voice steady, the same tone he used during conference calls when markets crashed and everyone needed someone to sound certain. "Her name is—" He realized he didn't know. "She's very sick, sweetheart. She needs help." Lily's face shifted through expressions faster than he could track them. Confusion concerned something that looked like recognition, even though that was impossible. She stepped closer, studying the woman with an intensity that made her seem much older than 6. Like Mommy was sick. The question hit harder than Garrett expected. He swallowed against the sudden tightness in his throat. "Different sick. She's very cold. Can you get your warmest blanket, the pink one with the stars?" Lily nodded once, decisive, and ran toward her room. Garrett moved through the living room to the guest bedroom, the one they kept made up for visitors who rarely came. He laid the woman on the bed, unwrapping his coat to reveal the extent of her condition. The thin dress was soaked through, clinging to ribs that stood out too sharply. Bruises circled both wrists, purple shadows that suggested restraints. Her fingernails were torn at the corners like she'd tried to fight or claw at something. Mrs. Eleanor Finch appeared in the doorway, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. She was 55, British, and had been with the family for 10 years through Catherine's death and the aftermath that followed. Nothing surprised her anymore, but this came close. "Mr. Blackwell, what on earth?" "Hypothermia, doctor. Sterling is on her way. I need heated blankets, hot water bottles if we have them, and that heating pad from the linen closet." Eleanor didn't waste time with questions. She disappeared, already moving with the efficiency that made her irreplaceable. Garrett stripped off the wet dress, working quickly, clinically, trying not to see the bruises that covered the woman's ribs and upper arms. He wrapped her in the sheets, layering them to trap whatever body heat remained. Lily returned with her pink blanket, the one Catherine had made when she was pregnant, every star hand-stitched during late-night insomnia. She held it out with both hands, solemn as a priest offering communion. "This is the warmest one. I sleep with it every night, so it has extra warm in it already." Garrett took the blanket throat tight. "Thank you, Dragon." The nickname slipped out without thought. Catherine had started it, calling Lily their fierce little dragon after she'd stood up to a bully in preschool. Lily's face softened at the sound of it. "Is she going to be okay?" "I don't know yet, but we're going to try very hard to make sure she is." Lily moved closer to the bed, peering at the woman's face with that unnerving intensity again. "She looks like a princess, like the ones in stories who get cursed and have to sleep until true love wakes them up." "Those are just stories, sweetheart." "I know." Lily touched the woman's hand with one finger, gentle as a whisper. "But sad princesses always get happy endings eventually. That's the rule." Eleanor returned with an armload of supplies, followed by Thomas carrying a space heater. They worked in practice coordination, setting up the heating pad beneath the sheets, arranging hot water bottles around the woman's torso, positioning the heater to warm the room without overheating. Garrett checked her pulse again. 48 beats per minute, rising, breathing less shallow. The doorbell chimed. Thomas went to answer it, returning with Dr. Margaret Sterling. She was 62, gray hair pulled into a severe bun, carrying the black medical bag she'd had since her residency 40 years ago. Garrett had known her since childhood. She'd delivered him, treated him through measles and chickenpox, held his hand. When Catherine died and told him the truth about internal bleeding without softening the words. Margaret took one look at the woman on the bed and her expression went flat with controlled fury. How long has she been hypothermic? Unknown. I found her maybe 20 minutes ago. Core temperature is probably mid-80s, pulse is climbing back toward normal range, breathing is stabilizing. Margaret opened her bag, pulling out a digital thermometer and blood pressure cuff. History. None. No ID, no belongings. Someone left her in an alley with just a note. Garrett pulled the paper from his pocket, handing it over. Margaret read it, jaw tightening. This is abuse, Garrett. Whoever did this needs to be arrested. I know, but first she needs to survive. Margaret nodded once, all business. She inserted the thermometer, checked blood pressure, examined pupils with a pen light. Her hands moved over bruised skin with the gentleness of someone who'd seen too much violence and refused to add to it. Lily watched from the doorway, Rudy clutched tight until Margaret glanced up. Lily, sweetheart, could you do me a favor? I need some hot tea. Not too hot, just warm. Can you help Mrs. Finch make some? Lily looked at her father, who nodded permission. She left reluctantly, trailing Eleanor toward the kitchen. Margaret waited until they were out of earshot before continuing her examination. She pulled back the sheet, revealing the full extent of the bruising: wrists, ribs, upper thighs. Restraint marks, defensive wounds. She was held against her will, recently, within the last 48 hours. Margaret's voice carried the careful neutrality of someone testifying in court. The hypothermia probably saved her life. If she'd been conscious, if whoever did this had been more thorough, she wouldn't have made it. As it is, she's lucky you found her when you did. Another hour and we'd be talking about amputation, permanent brain damage, or worse. Garrett looked at the woman's face, trying to imagine what had brought her to that alley. The note said, "Nobody's girl," like she was disposable, like someone had decided her existence was a mistake that needed correcting. He thought about Catherine, about how quickly life could end, how easily a person could disappear. This woman wasn't going to disappear. Not on his watch. Treatment plan. Gradual rewarming. Too fast and we risk cardiac arrest. The heating pad and blankets are good. I'll start an IV warm fluids, monitor her vitals every 30 minutes. If her temperature drops or her heart rhythm becomes irregular, we go to the hospital immediately. No arguments. Understood. Margaret prepared the IV with practiced efficiency, finding a vein, despite the woman's dehydration. She hung the bag from a lamp, adjusted the drip rate, and wrapped a blood pressure cuff around the woman's arm that would automatically inflate every half hour. The equipment transformed the guest room into something between bedroom and hospital ward. Eleanor returned with tea, followed by Lily carrying a small tray with toast. She'd cut it into triangles, arranged them in a flower pattern. Catherine used to do that. Mrs. Finch said she'll need to eat when she wakes up, so I made her favorite shape. Garrett pulled his daughter close, kissing the top of her head. That's very thoughtful, Dragon. Can I stay with her, so she's not alone when she wakes up? Margaret looked at Garrett, a silent question. He weighed options: protect Lily from whatever darkness had touched this woman, or teach her that helping strangers was worth the risk. Catherine would have said the latter. She'd always believed in opening doors, not closing them. For a little while, but if she wakes up scared or confused, you come get me immediately. Deal? Deal. Lily settled into the chair beside the bed, Rudy on her lap, watching the woman's face with the patience of someone much older. Margaret checked her watch, noting the time on a chart she'd started. Garrett stood at the foot of the bed looking at the stranger who'd become his responsibility and wondered what he'd set in motion by stopping his car tonight. Hours passed in measured increments. Margaret checked vitals, adjusted heating levels, monitored the IV drip. The woman's temperature climbed 86, 87, 88 degrees. Her pulse steadied at 62 beats per minute. Color returned to her lips, pink replacing purple. Around 9 o'clock, Lily fell asleep in the chair curled around Rudy with that boneless exhaustion only children achieved. Garrett carried her to her own room, tucking her into bed and whispering promises about Christmas morning. When he returned, Margaret was writing notes in her chart. She's stable. Temperature is 89 and climbing. Another few hours and she should wake up naturally. I'll stay until then. You don't have to. Yes, I do. This is assault at minimum, possibly attempted murder. When she wakes up, she's going to be terrified, disoriented, possibly violent, depending on what she remembers. You need a medical professional present, and I'm here. Margaret closed her bag with a decisive snap. Besides, it's Christmas Eve. I have nowhere better to be. Garrett knew better than to argue with her. He made coffee strong and black, and they settled into a vigil that stretched into the small hours of Christmas morning. At some point, Eleanor brought sandwiches neither of them ate. Thomas checked in before heading home to his own family, leaving instructions to call if anything was needed. The penthouse grew quiet except for the soft beep of the blood pressure monitor and the whisper of warm air through heating vents. At 2:17 in the morning, the woman's eyelids fluttered. Margaret was on her feet, immediately checking pupils' pulse, placing a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder. Easy now. You're safe. You're in a private residence being treated for hypothermia. My name is Dr. Sterling. Can you hear me? The woman's eyes opened fully, dark blue irises moving between Margaret's face and the unfamiliar ceiling. Her lips formed words without sound, trying to speak through a throat that felt like gravel. Margaret held a cup of water with a straw supporting the woman's head while she sipped. Small amounts. Your body needs time to adjust. Margaret set the cup aside. Can you tell me your name? The woman's voice came out barely above a whisper, damaged from cold and screaming. Nora Calloway. Garrett stepped into her line of sight, keeping his distance to avoid crowding. I'm Garrett Blackwell. I found you tonight on Park Avenue. You were hypothermic. Do you remember how you got there? Nora's eyes locked onto his face, searching for threat or safety, trying to categorize him. Her gaze moved to the IV in her arm, the heating pad beneath her, the medical equipment, and finally to the window where snow fell against glass 72 floors above the street. Comprehension dawned slowly, bringing with it something worse than fear, shame. I don't... He said... Her voice broke. There was a note. Garrett pulled the paper from his pocket, unfolding it carefully. Nora's face crumpled as she read the words, confirming what she already knew but had hoped was a nightmare. Nobody's girl, a mistake being corrected. Margaret's hand tightened on her shoulder. Who did this to you? Nora closed her eyes, tears sliding into her hair. Donovan Kincaid. I thought we were together. 3 years. The name registered immediately. Garrett kept his face neutral, but his mind was already pulling up information. Kincaid Tech, a startup valued at $500 million, CEO known for aggressive business practices and an upcoming IPO. They'd crossed paths at investor conferences, never done business together because Garrett had gotten a bad read on the man. Too smooth, too willing to promise anything to close a deal. Now this, what happened? Nora opened her eyes again, focusing on the ceiling instead of faces. Yesterday morning, he said we needed to talk. Told me to get in his car. He drove to this alley and just stopped. Handed me that note. Took my phone, my wallet, my keys, even my coat. Said I was embarrassing him, that his business partners' wives were elegant, and I was just... Her voice broke completely. He said I was nobody's girl. Then he drove away. Margaret's expression could have frozen water. How long were you there? I don't know. Hours. I tried to walk, but my shoes hurt, so I took them off, and then I couldn't feel my feet. And I thought maybe if I just sat down for a minute. Nora's hands clenched in the sheets. I thought I was going to die. I really thought that was it. Nobody's girl dies in nobody's alley, and nobody cares. I care. The words came out harder than Garrett intended. You're not nobody. You're Nora Calloway, and what happened to you is criminal assault. We have evidence. We can press charges. With what? Nora's laugh sounded broken. I have nothing. He took everything. No ID, no money, no proof I even exist. We'll get proof. My attorney is one of the best in the city. She specializes in cases like this. Cases like this. Cases like... Nora repeated the words like they tasted bitter. How many cases like this are there? Margaret stepped in her doctor voice, gentle but firm. More than anyone wants to admit, but right now you need to focus on recovery. Your body has been through severe trauma. You need rest fluids and time. We can talk about legal options when you're stronger. Nora's eyes drifted closed again. Exhaustion pulling her under. Margaret checked her vitals one more time, made notes on her chart, and gestured for Garrett to follow her into the hallway. They stood in the dim light of Christmas morning, voices low. She'll need several days to fully recover. Hypothermia does damage beyond just temperature. Confusion, memory problems, extreme fatigue. She shouldn't be alone. She can stay here as long as she needs. Garrett! Margaret's tone carried warning. This is complicated. This Kincaid character sounds dangerous, vindictive. If he finds out she's here, then we'll deal with it. But I'm not putting her back on the street, and I'm not letting him get away with this. Margaret studied his face, seeing something that made her sigh. You're thinking about Catherine. I'm thinking about the fact that someone needed help and I was in a position to give it, that's all. If you say so. Margaret didn't sound convinced. I'll come back tomorrow to check on her. In the meantime, monitor her temperature, make sure she drinks plenty of fluids, and call me if anything changes. And Garrett, that note is evidence. Don't lose it. She left through the private elevator, taking her medical bag and chart. Garrett stood in the hallway, listening to the quiet sounds of the penthouse heating system humming distant traffic from the street below, the soft beep of the blood pressure monitor in the guest room. He checked his watch. 3:40 in the morning, Christmas Day. Lily would be awake in a few hours, demanding to open presents and bake cookies and celebrate, despite the stranger sleeping down the hall. He should sleep. He should at least try. Instead, Garrett returned to the guest room, settling into the chair Lily had abandoned, and watched Nora Calloway breathe. Her face looked younger in sleep, less haunted. Someone had tried to erase her, and for reasons he couldn't fully articulate even to himself. Garrett was going to make sure that whoever it was paid for every second she'd spent freezing in that alley. Sunlight woke him hours later, streaming through the windows that faced east over the park. Garrett blinked against the brightness, neck stiff from sleeping upright. The room felt warmer now, heating pad still working, IV bag nearly empty. Nora was still asleep, but her breathing had changed, deeper and more regular. The blood pressure monitor showed normal reading. Sound filtered down the hallway. Lily's voice, high and excited, probably discovering the presents that Eleanor had arranged under the tree last night. Garrett stood working, feeling back into his legs, and headed toward the living room. Lily sat cross-legged in her pajamas, surrounded by wrapped boxes, but she wasn't opening anything. She was waiting. "Daddy, it's Christmas. Can we wake up the princess?" Garrett sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her narrow shoulders. Not Princess. Her name is Nora, and she needs to sleep a little longer. She was very sick last night. Is she better now? Getting better. Dr. Sterling says she'll be okay. Lily nodded, satisfied with this answer. She picked at the ribbon on a present, then looked up at her father with those green eyes that saw too much. Why did someone leave her in the cold? That's mean. Yes, it is. Very mean. Are you going to fix it? The question was so direct, so full of trust, that Garrett felt something crack in his chest. His daughter believed he could fix things, protect people, make the world safer. Catherine had believed that too, right up until the moment someone's carelessness had killed her. I'm going to try, Dragon. I promise I'm going to try. Lily seemed to accept this. She picked up a small box wrapped in silver paper. I got Nora a present. Sweetheart, you didn't know. No, I mean I got one yesterday at the Christmas market with Mrs. Finch. It was supposed to be for Mrs. Finch, but I think Nora needs it more. She handed him the box. Garrett unwrapped it carefully, revealing a snow globe New York City skyline in miniature. The Empire State Building and Chrysler Building rendered in delicate detail. He turned it over, reading the inscription engraved on the base, "Home is where you belong." Lily, this is beautiful, but are you sure? Princesses always need magic. The snow makes everything pretty again, even the sad parts. Before Garrett could respond, Eleanor appeared with a tray of hot chocolate and Christmas cookies. She'd added extra marshmallows to Lily's cup, a tradition from when Catherine was alive. They sat together by the tree, drinking chocolate and watching snow fall outside, and for a few minutes it almost felt like Christmas used to feel before grief became the fourth member of their family. Around noon, Nora woke again. Garrett heard the blood pressure monitor beeping its measurement cycle and went to check. She was sitting up this time, looking less disoriented, taking in her surroundings with clearer eyes. He knocked on the doorframe before entering. How are you feeling? Like I was hit by a truck. Nora's voice was stronger now, rough but functional. Or froze to death. Both essentially. Garrett pulled the chair closer. You've been unconscious for about 10 hours. Your core temperature is back to normal, vitals are stable. Dr. Sterling will check on you later today. Nora looked down at herself, at the borrowed nightgown Eleanor had changed her into while she slept, at the IV still taped to her arm. Her hands moved to her wrists, tracing the bruises that had darkened to deep purple overnight. I should thank you for stopping, for bringing me here. Most people would have just called 911 and kept driving. I'm not most people. Clearly. She managed something close to a smile. I'd ask where here is, but the penthouse and the private medical attention kind of give it away. You're wealthy. I run an investment firm. It does well. And you just happen to rescue random women on Christmas Eve. The question held an edge, defensive posturing from someone who'd learned to distrust kindness. Garrett understood it. He kept his voice level, matter-of-fact. 3 years ago, my wife was in a car accident. She called me twice while I was working. I didn't answer. By the time I got to the hospital, she was dead. The police said several cars passed the accident before someone finally stopped. So no, I don't just happen to rescue people. I stopped because someone didn't stop when it mattered, and I've been trying to fix that mistake ever since. Nora's defensiveness crumbled. She looked at him with something like recognition, the way one wounded person recognizes another. I'm sorry about your wife. And I'm sorry about whatever brought you to that alley. But you're safe now. You can stay here as long as you need. I can't pay you. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking? Nothing. Except maybe that you let yourself heal. Before Nora could respond, Lily appeared in the doorway, still in her Christmas pajamas, holding the wrapped snow globe in both hands like an offering. You're awake. I've been waiting forever. She bounced into the room with the fearless energy of childhood. I'm Lily Rose Blackwell. I'm 6 3/4. My birthday is February 14th, which is also Valentine's Day. But that's not why they named me Lily. They named me Lily because it was my mommy's favorite flower. Garrett reached out to slow her down, but Nora was smiling, the first genuine expression he'd seen on her face. That's a beautiful name, and a beautiful reason. Thank you. You're very pretty even though you look sad. Daddy says sad people need extra kindness. Lily held out the present. This is for you. Merry Christmas. Nora took the box with shaking hands, carefully peeling away silver paper to reveal the snow globe. She turned it over, reading the inscription, and tears started falling before she could stop them. Lily's eyes went wide. Oh no, presents aren't supposed to make people cry. Unless they're happy tears, are they happy tears? Nora nodded, unable to speak. She shook the globe, watching snow swirl around the miniature city, covering everything in white perfection. Home is where you belong. She'd spent 3 years trying to belong to Donovan, molding herself into whatever shape he wanted. And in the end, he'd decided she belonged nowhere. But this child, this stranger's daughter, had handed her belonging wrapped in silver paper like it was the simplest gift in the world. Happy tears, Nora finally managed. Definitely happy tears. Thank you, Lily. This is the most thoughtful present I've ever received. Lily beamed, then climbed onto the bed with the casual boundary crossing only children could get away with. Do you like Christmas? We're about to make cookies, the kind with frosting. You can help if you're not too sick. Lily, Nora needs to rest. I'd love to help. Nora's voice was firm despite the exhaustion clear in her face. If that's okay, I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding, Garrett said. But if you're going to be vertical, we should probably get you something warmer to wear than a nightgown. Eleanor appeared as if summoned by conversation alone, carrying a stack of folded clothes. I took the liberty of purchasing some basics this morning. Sweatpants, sweaters, socks. Nothing fancy, but they'll do until we can properly shop. She set them on the dresser, her British accent softening with unexpected gentleness. There's a bathroom through that door. Take your time, dear. We'll be in the kitchen when you're ready. After they left, Nora sat holding the snow globe, watching artificial snow settle over the city inside glass. Her city. The one she'd lived in for 3 years while Donovan systematically erased her identity, convinced her she was nobody special. Nobody worth remembering. She thought about the notes still somewhere in this apartment. Those words that had felt true when she read them in the alley. Nobody's girl. But Lily had looked at her and seen someone worth giving presents to. Garrett had looked at her and seen someone worth saving. Maybe Donovan was wrong. Maybe she wasn't nobody's girl. Maybe she'd just forgotten how to be her own. The clothes Eleanor brought fit well enough: gray sweatpants, a cream cable knit sweater that probably cost more than Nora's rent used to. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, at the face that had nearly frozen to death last night, and made a decision. She'd stay, she'd heal, and then she'd figure out how to make Donovan Kincaid pay for every second he'd left her in that alley. The kitchen smelled like sugar and butter when Nora emerged. Lily had flour in her hair and frosting on her nose, standing on a step stool to reach the counter while Eleanor guided her through measuring ingredients. Garrett sat at the island with a laptop working despite the holiday, but he looked up when Nora entered. How do you feel? Like I might survive. She managed a smile. Your housekeeper has excellent taste in comfortable clothes. Mrs. Finch has excellent taste in everything. It's why we'd be lost without her. Eleanor made a dismissive sound but looked pleased. Lily waved a wooden spoon. Nora, you have to help me decorate. Daddy's terrible at it. He makes all the cookies look like blobs. They're supposed to look like Santa. Blob's daddy, blobs in red suits. Garrett raised his hands in surrender. Nora found herself laughing, actually laughing for the first time in months. She joined Lily at the counter, picking up a piping bag full of green frosting, and together they transformed sugar cookies into Christmas trees and snowmen and stars. Eleanor supervised with warm approval. Garrett watched from his laptop, occasionally glancing up to catch Nora's eye with something that might have been relief or recognition, or both. Hours passed in the comfortable rhythm of baking and decorating. Lily chattered about school and friends and the reindeer she'd seen in Central Park last winter that might have been a regular deer, but she chose to believe was one of Santa's. Nora listened, asked questions, felt herself thawing from the inside out, in a way that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with being treated like a person instead of a problem. Late afternoon brought Dr. Sterling back, carrying her black bag and a stern expression that softened when she saw Nora upright and coherent. She checked vitals, asked questions about pain and confusion, examined the bruising with clinical detachment. "You're healing well. Better than expected, honestly. You're young and healthy, which helped, but you also got very lucky. If Mr. Blackwell hadn't found you when he did..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "I know," Nora said quietly. "Believe me, I know." Margaret pulled out a business card, pressing it into Nora's palm. "This is my direct number. Call if you experience any confusion, difficulty breathing, or increased pain." And Nora, what happened to you wasn't your fault. Whoever did this, whatever he told you about being nobody, he was wrong. You hear me? He was wrong. Nora's eyes burned, but she didn't let herself cry again. She'd cried enough. That evening, after Lily had been tucked into bed with promises of more cookies tomorrow, Garrett and Nora sat in the living room with the lights dimmed and the city glowing beyond the windows. Snow fell steadily, transforming the park into something magical. Nora held the snow globe, shaking it occasionally, watching the manufactured weather inside. "I don't know how to thank you," she said finally, "for all of this. Most people wouldn't have stopped. You did. You already thanked me. Not enough. You saved my life. That's not something you just thank someone for and move on." Garrett turned to look at her, his gray eyes catching city light. "Then don't move on yet. Stay. Heal. Figure out what comes next when you're strong enough to make real decisions. I don't have anywhere else to go. Donovan took everything. My apartment was his. My phone was on his plan. My bank account, I never even had one. He said he'd handle the money, and I was stupid enough to believe him." "You weren't stupid. You were controlled. There's a difference." Nora shook the snow globe again, harder this time. "I should have seen it. The way he slowly cut me off from friends, from my job, from anything that wasn't him. Classic abuser playbook. But I thought he loved me. I thought we were building something." "What did he do for work?" "He's CEO of Kincaid Tech. Some kind of app company. I never really understood the details. He said it was too complicated to explain." She laughed bitterly. Translation: I was too stupid to understand. Garrett's expression shifted slightly, calculation moving behind his eyes. "Kincaid Tech. Donovan Kincaid. I know that name. You said you'd never done business with him." "I haven't, but I know of him. He's been raising capital for an IPO scheduled for next spring. Aggressive timeline, questionable metrics. I passed on investing because something felt off." "Clearly your instincts were right." "Apparently." Garrett stood, moving to the window to look out at the snow. "Nora, I need to tell you something. When you're ready, when you've had time to recover, I have an attorney who can help you. Her name is Claudia Brennan. She specializes in domestic abuse cases, financial control, all of it. And I think..." He turned back to face her. "I think you might not be the first woman Donovan has done this to." The words hit like cold water. Nora set down the snow globe carefully, afraid she might drop it. What makes you say that? Because men like him don't start with attempted murder. They escalate. If he was comfortable leaving you to die, he's been practicing control and cruelty for a long time. So you think there are other women I think it's possible. And if there are, finding them might be the key to making sure he never does this again. Nora looked at her hands, at the IV mark in the crook of her elbow, at the bruises circling her wrists like terrible jewelry. Somewhere in this city, Donovan was probably celebrating Christmas with his family or friends or business partners. Convinced he'd solved a problem by throwing it away, the note had said she was a mistake he was correcting, like she was nothing more than a typo in his perfect life. "I want him to pay," she said, voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I want everyone to know what he did. I want him to feel even a fraction of what I felt in that alley, thinking I was going to die and nobody would care enough to find my body. Then we'll make that happen. But not tonight. Tonight you rest." Garrett walked Nora back to the guest room, making sure she had water and her phone. A new one he'd had delivered earlier, already set up with a fresh number. She looked at it like it was alien technology. "I don't have anyone to call." "Then call me if you need anything. My number's already programmed in." After he left, Nora lay in the darkness, listening to the quiet sounds of the penthouse. She thought about the snow globe on the nightstand, about Lily's innocent belief in happy endings, about Garrett's controlled fury on her behalf. She thought about the note currently locked in a safe somewhere in this apartment, evidence of Donovan's cruelty. Most of all, she thought about the woman she'd been before Donovan, the one who'd had friends and a job and dreams, and wondered if it was possible to find her again. The next morning started with Lily bursting into the room at 7:30, demanding Nora come see the snow in the park because it was the perfect snow, the kind that made everything look like a snow globe. Garrett appeared behind her, apologizing. "She's been up since 6. I tried to give you more time." "It's fine." Nora was already sitting up, feeling steadier than yesterday. "I want to see the perfect snow." They stood at the living room windows together, all three of them watching Central Park transform into winter art. Lily pressed her hands against the glass, making foggy prints. "It's like the whole world got erased and started over. Everything's clean. Clean. New. A fresh start." Nora held those words like a promise. The days after Christmas blurred together in a rhythm of healing and small discoveries. Dr. Sterling visited daily, monitoring Nora's recovery. Eleanor taught her how to make proper British tea. Lily dragged her into elaborate games involving stuffed animals and complex royal hierarchies. Garrett worked from home more than usual, present without hovering, checking in without making Nora feel like a patient. On December 27th, Claudia Brennan arrived. She was 45, sharp-featured, with steel gray hair cut in a precise bob and eyes that missed nothing. She sat across from Nora in Garrett's study, legal pad and recorder on the table between them. "Mr. Blackwell says you're ready to talk. Are you—" Nora took a breath, steadying herself. "Yes." For the next 2 hours, she told everything. Meeting Donovan 3 years ago when she was waitressing at an upscale restaurant in Soho. His immediate charm, the way he'd seemed genuinely interested in her dreams of becoming a graphic designer. The first red flag, she'd ignored his insistence she quit her job because his girlfriend shouldn't have to serve food. Moving into his apartment because it was practical. The slow isolation from friends who didn't understand their relationship. The financial control dressed up as care. Claudia took notes without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Nora got to Christmas Eve, to the alley, and the note, Claudia's pen stopped moving. "Did anyone else see this note besides you and Mr. Blackwell?" Dr. Sterling read it. "Good. That's 3 witnesses to physical evidence. Do you have any other documentation, emails, texts, voicemails from Donovan? Everything was on the phone he took, but he sent emails to my old address sometimes. I might be able to access them if the account still exists. Claudia made a note. We'll work on recovering those. In the meantime, I need to tell you something that might be difficult to hear. She set down her pen, folding her hands. What Donovan did to you is absolutely criminal. Assault, false imprisonment, attempted manslaughter at minimum. But prosecuting him will be complicated. He'll claim the relationship ended amicably, that you chose to leave his apartment, that any injuries were self-inflicted for attention. Rich men have good lawyers and better PR firms. So he gets away with it. Nora's voice shook with rage, not fear. He leaves me to die and just walks away. I didn't say that. I said it will be complicated, but here's what we can do. We can build a pattern. If you're right about there being other women, other victims, we can find them. One woman's story is he said, she said. 5 women with identical stories, that's a pattern of abuse that's much harder to dismiss. How do we find them? Carefully, discreetly, starting with anything you remember Donovan saying about past relationships. Nora thought back through 3 years of conversations, trying to remember details she'd ignored at the time. There had been mentions of exes always framed as problems he'd solved. One woman he'd called too emotional, another who was too dependent, a third who'd stolen from him, although he'd never pressed charges. He talked about them like they were mistakes he'd corrected. Nora said slowly, hearing her own words echo the note. Just like me. Then that's where we start. Claudia stood, extending her hand. I'm going to need time to investigate, build a case. In the meantime, you focus on healing and rebuilding your identity. Mr. Blackwell mentioned you don't have a bank account. No. Donovan controlled all the finances. We'll fix that. I'm also going to look into your legal status, license, social security records, anything he might have accessed. And Nora, Claudia's grip tightened slightly. This isn't your fault. Men like Donovan are predators. They're skilled at making their victims believe they deserve the abuse. You didn't deserve this. Not any of it. After Claudia left, Nora sat in the study, staring at the legal pad full of her own history reduced to bullet points and evidence tags. Garrett appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. How are you feeling? Like I'm about to go to war. War requires allies. You have those now. Nora took the coffee, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Why are you doing this? Really, you don't know me. For all you know, I'm lying about everything. Garrett sat in the chair Claudia had vacated. I'm a pretty good judge of character, built a career on reading people. You're not lying. He paused, considering his next words. But even if I had doubts, even if I thought there was a chance you'd made all of this up, I'd still help you. Because the alternative, that you're telling the truth and I did nothing, would make me the kind of person I don't want to be. Your wife would have liked that answer. Catherine would have beaten me over the head with it if I'd even considered not helping. His smile was sad, nostalgic. She believed in opening doors for people, in second chances, in refusing to walk past suffering even when it was inconvenient. I'm trying to live up to that. I think you're doing pretty well. New Year's Eve arrived with surprising speed. Garrett had to attend a brief board meeting, leaving Nora and Lily with Eleanor. They spent the afternoon making resolutions and decorating cookies again, a tradition Lily insisted on. When Garrett returned early evening, he found them in the kitchen, covered in frosting. We made a resolution cookie for you. Lily held up a misshapen star covered in blue icing. Eleanor says blue means trustworthy. That's your resolution, being trustworthy. I'm honored. Garrett took the cookie solemnly. What's your resolution, Dragon? Being brave, even when it's hard. Lily looked at Nora. What's yours? Nora held up her own cookie, a heart covered in silver. Being my own person again, no matter how long it takes. At night after Lily had fallen asleep on the couch during a movie after Eleanor had retreated to her quarters, Garrett and Nora stood at the windows watching fireworks bloom over the park. The city celebrated the new year with light and sound, and Nora felt something shift inside her chest. Hope, maybe, or determination, or just the simple fact of survival. "It's been a week," she said quietly. "A week since you found me. It feels like a lifetime." "In some ways it is. You're not the same person who was in that alley." "No, I'm not." Nora turned to face him. "Thank you, Garrett, for everything, for stopping, for bringing me here, for believing me." "You don't need to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do, because without you I'd be dead or broken or still trying to convince myself I deserved what Donovan did. Instead, I'm here making resolutions, eating cookies with your daughter, planning how to take down the man who tried to erase me. That's worth a few thank yous." Fireworks exploded in gold and red. Garrett's phone buzzed with a message. He glanced at the screen, expression hardening. "What is it?" "Email from my brother. He sent me a news alert." Garrett turned the phone so Nora could see the screen. The headline glowed in the darkness: "Kincaid Tech CEO announces engagement to Hargrove Industries heiress." Below it, a photo: Donovan in a perfect suit smiling at a camera with his arm around a blonde woman in diamonds. The woman looked polished, elegant, everything Donovan had said. Nora wasn't. The caption read, "Tech entrepreneur Donovan Kincaid and Sutton Hargrove to wed in spring ceremony combining two industry powerhouses." The article was dated December 31st. Today. He'd announced his engagement exactly 1 week after leaving Nora to die. The phone slipped from Nora's numb fingers. Garrett caught it, steadying both the device and her. He already had her. When he left me in that alley, he already had someone else lined up. I wasn't even a person to him. I was just an obstacle. "Nora, no." Her voice shook with fury instead of grief. "No, this is good. This proves he's capable of planning, of coldly deciding to erase someone who inconvenienced him. And if he did it to me, if he moved on this quickly..." She looked up at Garrett with steel in her eyes. "Then Claudia's right. There are others. There have to be. Men like him don't start with attempted murder. They practice." Outside, fireworks painted the sky in colors that reflected off fresh snow. The city welcomed a new year, while Nora Calloway stood in a borrowed penthouse 72 floors above the street and made a different kind of resolution. She would find the other women. She would build a case. She would make Donovan Kincaid pay for every second she'd spent believing she was nobody's girl. Because she wasn't nobody. She never had been. She'd just forgotten how to be her own. January 2nd arrived with sharp winter light that turned Central Park into a study in contrasts: white snow against black trees, frozen pathways cutting through drifts that rose to knee height. Nora stood at the living room window watching joggers navigate the transformed landscape, their breath visible in air cold enough to sting. 8 days since Garrett had pulled her from that alley. 8 days since she'd decided to stop being someone else's mistake. Claudia Brennan's investigation moved with surgical precision. By January 5th, she'd recovered access to Nora's old email account, finding 3 years of correspondence that painted a damning picture. Donovan's messages tracked the progression: affectionate in year 1, controlling in year 2, openly dismissive by year 3. One email from 6 months ago particularly stood out, sent after Nora had mentioned wanting to take a design class. "We've discussed this. Your focus should be on supporting my career, not chasing hobbies that won't lead anywhere. I need a partner who understands priorities." Nora read it in Garrett's study, Claudia taking notes across the desk. "He made me feel like ambition was selfishness. That's the goal. Abusers reframe independence as betrayal. Claudia highlighted several passages. These emails establish pattern and timeline, but we need more. I've been searching public records, social media, anywhere Donovan's past might surface. So far, I've found references to 3 previous relationships, all ending abruptly with no public explanation. Can we contact them? Not directly. If Donovan has NDAs in place, approaching them could trigger legal action, but... Claudia pulled out a folder. One of them, a woman named Meredith Thorne, wrote a blog post 4 years ago about recovering from financial abuse by a tech executive. No names mentioned, but the details match. She lives in Brooklyn now, works as a therapist. I think she might talk if approached correctly. Meaning you reach out. One survivor to another. No lawyers, no pressure, just 2 women who might have survived the same predator. The thought terrified and energized Nora in equal measure. She looked at Garrett, who'd been silent through most of the meeting. What do you think? I think you're the only one who can make that call. But if she agrees to talk, you won't go alone. By January 8th, Nora had drafted a message to Meredith, brief, honest, referencing the blog post without specifics. She sent it through the contact form on Meredith's therapy practice website, then waited. 24 hours later, a response arrived, 3 words that made Nora's hands shake. I'll meet you. They arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Park Slope neutral territory. Garrett insisted on driving, staying close but giving Nora space. Meredith was 32, with auburn hair cut short and cautious eyes that assessed Nora before she'd even sat down. You're the woman from the article. Nora froze. What article? The one Donovan's PR team is already trying to bury. Someone leaked it this morning. Meredith pulled out her phone, showing a draft post from a business news site. Kincaid Tech CEO faces abuse allegations from former partner. The article was brief, unnamed sources carefully worded to avoid libel. But it existed. Someone had decided Nora's story deserved air. I didn't authorize this. Doesn't matter. Once these things start, they take on their own momentum. Meredith's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I believe you. I know what he's capable of. They talked for 2 hours. Meredith's story ran parallel to Nora's. Met Donovan at a networking event, swept into his orbit, slowly isolated from support systems. The relationship had lasted 18 months before ending abruptly when Meredith's father died and left her a modest inheritance. He tried to convince me to invest it in his company. When I refused, he ended things within a week. Left me a note, actually. Said I was too emotionally unstable for his future plans. She stirred her coffee, not drinking. I signed an NDA for $50,000 because I was broke and scared, and he had lawyers who made it clear fighting would destroy me. How many others do you think there are? At least 2 more that I know of. He has a type: independent women who've lost family, who don't have safety nets. Easier to control when there's no one checking on you. Nora felt ice in her veins. She'd lost her parents in a car accident when she was 23. Her grandmother had died 18 months ago. Donovan hadn't chosen her randomly. He'd selected her. Would you be willing to talk to a lawyer, break the NDA? Meredith's laugh held no humor. You know what happens when you break an NDA with a man like Donovan. He sues you into bankruptcy, drags your name through every court in the state, makes you radioactive to employers. I have a practice now, patients who depend on me. I can't risk that. What if you weren't alone? What if there were enough of us that his lawyers couldn't silence everyone? Something flickered in Meredith's eyes. Fear, maybe, or hope disguised as fear. Find the others first, then we'll talk. Nora returned to the penthouse with new determination and a migraine that lasted 3 days. Garrett brought her medicine and water, sat with her in the darkened guest room while she processed what she'd learned. Lily came by with drawings of butterflies because They're gentle and pretty, and they make sad people feel better. On January 10th, Claudia called with news. Roman Blackwell, Garrett's uncle and a former FBI agent, had found two more women, Tessa Crane and Isla Hartley. Both had dated Donovan years ago, both relationships ending in sudden coldness and carefully worded departure letters. Neither had signed NDAs, but both had been threatened with lawsuits if they spoke publicly. Roman thinks he can arrange a meeting. All of you together. Safety in numbers. The meeting happened on January 12th in Claudia's office. 5 women gathered in a conference room with Manhattan visible through 20th floor windows. Meredith came despite her reservations. Tessa was 29, a graphic designer who dated Donovan 6 years ago. Isla was 34, a former marketing executive who'd been with him 8 years back. Their stories wove together into a pattern so clear it felt like testimony, isolation, financial control, sudden abandonment when they became inconvenient. Isla's departure had come when she got a job offer in Boston. Tessa's when she questioned his business practices. Each woman had been told in slightly different words that she wasn't enough. "He has this way of making you feel like you're the problem," Tessa explained, hands wrapped around coffee she wasn't drinking. "Like if you'd just been smarter or prettier or more understanding, everything would have worked out." Isla nodded. "I believed it for years. Thought I'd failed at the one relationship that mattered. Took therapy and a really patient girlfriend to realize he was gaslighting me the entire time." By the end of the meeting, something had shifted. 5 women who'd been isolated and silenced had found each other, and in finding each other found their voices. Claudia took notes, building a timeline that stretched 8 years and showed escalating cruelty. Donovan didn't just control women. He refined his technique, with each one learning what worked, what scared them into silence. "This is enough for criminal charges," Claudia concluded. "Multiple victims, consistent pattern, documented threats, but..." She looked at each woman in turn. "Prosecution means going public. It means your names in papers, reporters asking questions, his lawyers trying to destroy your credibility. Are you prepared for that?" The room fell silent. Nora thought about the note still locked in Garrett's safe, about the 7 days she'd spent believing she was nobody. She thought about Lily asking why someone would leave her in the cold, and Garrett's promise to try to fix it. "I'm prepared." Her voice came out stronger than expected. "I'm tired of being afraid of him." One by one, the others agreed. Meredith last her decision, visibly costing her something, but making it anyway. "Then we move forward." Claudia closed her folder with finality. "I'll contact the district attorney's office tomorrow. In the meantime, expect retaliation. Donovan will know you've connected. He'll escalate." The prediction proved accurate within 48 hours. On January 14th, a cease and desist letter arrived at Garrett's office addressed to Nora. Donovan's legal team demanded she stop making false and defamatory statements, threatened a $10 million lawsuit, and gave her 72 hours to sign a statement recanting her allegations in exchange for a $50,000 settlement. Garrett brought the letter home, watching Nora read it with a carefully blank expression. "They're trying to scare you. It's working." But her hands didn't shake when she set the paper down. "What happens if I refuse? They'll file the lawsuit. It'll be expensive, time-consuming, and strategically designed to exhaust you into surrender. And if I fight back, then we fight together. My legal team against his, my resources against his threats. And Nora..." Garrett's gray eyes held hers with absolute certainty. "I've built a career on knowing when someone's bluffing. Donovan is terrified. This lawsuit is desperation dressed as power." Claudia agreed. On January 15th, they drafted a response that included 3 words destined to become a rallying cry: "See you in court." 2 days later, Claire Morrison from the Wall Street Journal called. She was 54, had 2 Pulitzer nominations, and specialized in exposing corporate misconduct. Someone had sent her the leaked article along with Nora's name and contact information. "I'd like to do a full investigative piece, on the record with your full cooperation. The kind of story that's hard to bury or dismiss." Nora met her at Garrett's office, Claudia present as legal counsel. Claire set up a recorder and a notepad, then asked a simple question that required a complicated answer. "Tell me what happened from the beginning." Nora told her everything. 3 years compressed into 90 minutes, meeting Donovan, losing herself, waking up hypothermic in a penthouse she didn't recognize. She showed Claire the notes still preserved in a plastic sleeve. She shared emails, text screenshots. Claudia had recovered photos of bruises that had since faded to yellow-green. Claire took notes without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Nora finished, Claire set down her pen. "I'm going to need a few days to verify facts and reach out to Donovan's team for comment. They'll deny everything. His lawyers will threaten to sue me and the Journal. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared to stop letting him define who I am." The article published on January 21st with a headline that cut through noise from nobody's girl to her own tech CEO's pattern of abuse exposed. Claire had included everything: Nora's testimony, confirmation from 4 other women, expert commentary on financial abuse, analysis of Donovan's rapid engagement announcement. The note appeared as a photo, Donovan's handwriting visible, his signature clear. Within 6 hours, nobody's girl was trending on social media. Women shared their own stories tagged. Donovan's company demanded accountability. Kincaid Tech's stock dropped 15% before noon. Investors called emergency meetings. Sutton Hargrove's family issued a statement distancing themselves from alleged criminal behavior, though they didn't break the engagement publicly. Nora watched it unfold from Garrett's study laptop, open to a cascade of support and rage. Lily found her there, climbing into her lap with the ease of belonging. "Mrs. Finch says you're famous now, like a movie star, but for being brave." "I don't feel very brave." "That's because you're doing it anyway. Daddy says that's what real brave is. Being scared and doing the hard thing because it's right." Garrett appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. "Donovan's team just released a statement. They're calling you a disgruntled ex-girlfriend seeking financial gain. They've hired a PR firm to discredit the article." "Let them try." Nora's voice surprised her with its steadiness. "I'm not the same woman he left in that alley. I won't be silenced by lawyers and spin doctors." But the price of speaking out revealed itself at Lily's school the next day. Eleanor picked her up as usual, finding her sitting alone on a bench while other children played. That evening, Lily came to find Nora, tears tracking down her face. "Some kids said mean things about you, about Daddy. They said—" Her voice broke. "They said their parents don't want them playing with me because our family is in the news for bad reasons." Nora's heart shattered. She pulled Lily close, feeling the small body shake with sobs. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. This is my fault." "No, it's not." "Those kids are stupid. You didn't do anything wrong." But the damage was done. Over the next week, 3 parents complained to the school about media attention and inappropriate adult situations affecting their children. The headmistress called Garrett in for a meeting, gently suggesting that perhaps Lily might benefit from staying home until the situation resolved itself. Garrett returned home, fury radiating off him in waves Nora could feel from across the room. "They want her to hide because you had the audacity to survive. Because I helped you instead of walking past. They're punishing my daughter for basic human decency." "Then maybe I should go." The words cost Nora everything. "Find my own place, create distance so this doesn't touch Lily anymore." "You're not going anywhere." Garrett, look what's happening. She's being bullied because of me. The school wants her gone because of me. How is any of this worth? You are worth it. His voice cut through her protests with absolute conviction. What you're doing standing up to Donovan, showing other women they don't have to accept abuse, that's worth everything. And I will not teach my daughter that we abandon people when it becomes inconvenient. Lily appeared between them, still in her school uniform, eyes red from crying. I don't want Nora to leave. I don't care what stupid kids say. She's part of our family now. The word family hung in the air, impossible and perfect. Nora looked at this child who'd given her a snow globe on Christmas morning, who believed sad princesses deserved happy endings, who was suffering social consequences for the crime of kindness. She looked at Garrett, who'd stopped his car on Christmas Eve and changed the trajectory of her entire life. Then she looked at herself in the window reflection, a woman who'd been nobody's girl but was learning to be her own. And she made a decision that would fracture something she hadn't realized she'd been building. On January 29th, Lily collapsed during afternoon recess. Seizure, the school nurse said when she called. Stress-induced, the ER doctor confirmed. Lily had epilepsy diagnosed after Catherine's death, usually controlled by medication, but triggered by anxiety. Nora rode in the ambulance with her, holding her small hand, watching monitors track heart rate and brain activity. Garrett met them at Presbyterian Hospital, running from the parking garage, terror written across his face in ways she'd never seen. Is she? She's stable, conscious, asking for you. They found Lily in a curtained bay, looking impossibly small against white sheets. She reached for Garrett the moment she saw him. Daddy, I got scared and everything went fuzzy. I know, baby, but you're okay now. The doctors are taking care of you. Dr. Sterling arrived within the hour, took Garrett aside for a conversation Nora couldn't hear but understood from his expression. When he returned, something in his eyes had changed. That night, after Lily had been released and was sleeping in her own bed, Garrett found Nora in the guest room packing the few belongings she'd accumulated. What are you doing? Leaving before I do more damage. Nora, don't. She folded a sweater with shaking hands. Dr. Sterling told you stress triggered the seizure. I'm the stress. The media attention, the lawsuit, Donovan's harassment, it's all connected to me. And I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't be the reason Lily suffers. I won't be. You're not responsible for this. Yes, I am. Donovan is targeting me, which means targeting anyone close to me. You and Lily are close to me, therefore you're targets. That's simple math. Garrett took the sweater from her hands, setting it aside. And where will you go? I have the trust money now. Claudia helped me access it. I'll get an apartment, continue working with the legal team, but from a distance, so Lily can be safe. Running away doesn't make her safer. It makes you isolated, which is exactly what Donovan wants. Maybe, but at least she won't have seizures because of me. The argument continued for another hour, both of them saying the same things in different ways. In the end, Nora won through sheer stubbornness and the undeniable fact that Lily's health mattered more than anyone's pride. She left the next morning while Garrett was on a conference call he couldn't postpone while Lily was still sleeping off medication. Eleanor found her at the elevator, pressed a small box into her hands. The snow globe. Lily would want you to have it. Eleanor, you're doing what you think is right. I respect that. But Mr. Blackwell and Lily, they need you more than you realize. Don't stay away forever. The apartment Nora found was small 8th floor of a walk-up in the Upper West Side. 1-bedroom kitchenette, a window that looked onto a brick wall. It cost most of her first month's trust distribution, but it was hers. Nobody's apartment but her own. She set up the snow globe on the windowsill, shook it once, watched manufactured snow settle over miniature buildings. Home is where you belong. The inscription mocked her now, because she'd just left the only place that had felt like home in 3 years. Claudia called that afternoon. Garrett told me you moved out. It was necessary. Was it? Or was it easier to run than to stay and fight? The question stung because it touched truth. Nora sat on the floor of her empty apartment, phone pressed to her ear, and felt the full weight of what she'd done. She'd survived Donovan's attempt to erase her, only to erase herself from the lives of people who'd made her visible again. Lily had a seizure because of me. Lily had a seizure because she's a child with epilepsy navigating a stressful situation. That's not the same as you causing it. It feels the same. Feelings aren't facts. But I understand why you left. Just don't convince yourself it was the only option. February arrived with a cold snap that turned the city brittle. Nora threw herself into work helping Claudia build the case, cataloging evidence, coordinating with the other women. Roman Blackwell found 2 more victims willing to talk, bringing the total to 7. 7 women over 10 years, all following the same pattern, all discarded when they became inconvenient. Garrett texted daily brief updates about Lily, questions about the legal proceedings, offers of help she consistently declined. She responded with equal brevity, maintaining just enough contact to avoid complete severance. It hurt more than she'd expected, this self-imposed distance. She'd known Garrett and Lily for barely 5 weeks, yet their absence carved holes in her days. On February 5th, 1 week after she'd left, Meredith called. I broke my NDA. Officially. Filed the paperwork this morning. Donovan's lawyers will probably come after me, but with 7 of us testifying, I figure there's strength in numbers. That's incredibly brave. No, what you did was brave, going public, facing him head on. I just followed your lead. The other women fell like dominoes. Tessa, Isla, the 2 new victims Roman had found. By February 8th, all 7 had given official statements to the DA's office. The investigation expanded, SEC getting involved after evidence emerged of financial irregularities at Kincaid Tech. The IPO scheduled for March 15th looked increasingly unlikely. Sutton Hargrove broke her engagement on February 9th, releasing a statement that stopped just short of calling Donovan a monster. The business press ran headlines about damaged reputations and toxic company culture. Kincaid Tech's stock dropped 40% in a single day, but victory tasted hollow in Nora's empty apartment. She'd won battles against Donovan while losing the war against loneliness. On February 10th, Garrett called instead of texting. His voice sounded tired. Lily's birthday is in 4 days, February 14th. She's turning 7. I remember. I have a gift for her. She doesn't want gifts. She wants you. Nora closed her eyes, fighting tears. Garrett, we discussed this. I can't come back. It's not safe for her. Safe from what Donovan's practically destroyed. The DA is building criminal charges. His company is imploding. You won. But Lily doesn't understand that. She just knows someone she cared about disappeared, and she's having nightmares about everyone leaving. Guilt twisted in Nora's chest. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt her. Then don't. Come to her party one afternoon. Let her see you're okay. Then we can figure out the rest. Before Nora could respond, she heard Lily's voice in the background, distant but clear. Is that Nora? Closer now, like she'd grabbed the phone. Nora, please come to my birthday. I don't want presents, just you. I wished on every star and every candle and every fountain penny for you to come back. The child's voice broke something in Nora that lawyers' arguments and logic couldn't touch. She'd spent weeks learning to be her own person, to stop letting others define her worth. But maybe being her own person meant choosing connection instead of isolation. Maybe it meant being brave enough to stay instead of safe enough to run. Okay. The words slipped out before courage could fail. I'll come. For the party. Lily's shriek of joy made Nora smile despite everything. Garrett returned to the line voice rough with emotion. Thank you. And Nora, we've missed you. Both of us. More than is probably wise. After hanging up, Nora sat in her apartment holding the snow globe, watching fake snow swirl around buildings that would never change. The inscription glowed in afternoon light. Home is where you belong. Maybe it was time to stop running from where she belonged. February 14th arrived with weak sunlight that barely cut through overcast skies, the kind of weather that promised more snow by evening. Nora stood outside Garrett's building holding a wrapped package, second-guessing her decision to come. 2 weeks away had given her clarity about what she'd lost, but returning felt like admitting she'd been wrong to leave in the first place. The doorman recognized her, waved her through to the elevator without questions. 72 floors passed in mechanical slints, each number bringing her closer to a confrontation she couldn't predict. The doors opened onto familiar territory that no longer felt quite like hers. Voices echoed from deeper in the penthouse, children laughing, Eleanor's accent cutting through chaos with instructions about napkins. Nora followed the sounds to the living room where 5 of Lily's school friends were engaged in some elaborate game involving paper crowns and a stuffed dragon that looked suspiciously like Rudy. Lily spotted her first. The shriek that followed could have shattered glass. Nora! The child launched herself across the room with complete disregard for furniture or physics, colliding with Nora hard enough to knock the package sideways. You actually came. Arms wrapped around Nora's waist with desperate strength, face buried in her sweater. The other children had stopped playing to stare. Garrett appeared from the kitchen, flour on his shirt, something unreadable in his expression. I promised I would. Promises don't always mean anything. Daddy explained that sometimes grown-ups promise things they can't do. But you did it. Lily pulled back, examining Nora's face with intensity that felt adult. Are you staying forever now? I'm here for your party. We can talk about forever later. That means no. Lily's face fell for exactly 3 seconds before determination replaced disappointment. Okay, then I'll make this party so fun you won't want to leave. She grabbed Nora's hand, dragging her toward the chaos. The other children accepted this new player without question, immediately incorporating her into their game as a captured knight who needed rescuing. Nora let herself be swept into childhood logic, grateful for the distraction. Garrett caught her eye across the room, mouthed, "Thank you," before Eleanor recruited him for cake logistics. The party unfolded with the particular energy that came from combining sugar excitement and 7-year-olds. Games dissolved into running became dancing, transformed into demands for food. The dining table had been decorated with princess themes. Purple tablecloth, silver crowns as party favors, a cake shaped like a castle with 7 candles. Lily presided over it all with birthday girl authority, directing seating arrangements with diplomatic precision. Nora sits next to me, Daddy on the other side, then Emma, then Jake, then... She continued until everyone had assigned positions, creating a hierarchy only she understood. They sang birthday songs, devoured cake, entered the chaos phase where children vibrated with sugar and needed redirecting every 30 seconds. Gradually, parents arrived to collect their offspring, thanking Garrett for hosting, pretending not to notice the woman whose face had been in newspapers for the past month. By 4 o'clock, only Nora, Garrett, Lily, and Eleanor remained amid wrapping paper debris. Present time. Lily had been patient by 7-year-old standards, but patience had limits. Nora's first, it's the special one. Nora retrieved the package she'd brought, watching Lily tear through wrapping with enthusiasm. Inside was a leather-bound book, handmade, illustrated on every page. The title read in careful calligraphy, "The Girl Who Thought She Was Nobody." Lily opened to the first page, eyes widening as she absorbed the watercolor illustrations. The story unfolded in images and text: a girl who believed the world when it called her nothing, a dragon who taught her to see her own strength, a journey from darkness into light. The final page showed the girl standing alone, surrounded by stars, with text that concluded, "And she learned that being nobody's meant being her own." And that was the greatest magic of all. Tears tracked down Lily's face before she reached the end. She looked up at Nora with those green eyes that saw too much. "This is about you. You're the girl who thought she was nobody. And you're the dragon, the one who taught me I was wrong." Lily threw herself forward, hugging Nora with the kind of force that communicated what words couldn't. Garrett moved closer, reading over his daughter's shoulder, jaw tight with emotion he was clearly fighting. "It's perfect." His voice came out rough. "You're incredibly talented." Before Nora could respond, the building intercom buzzed. Garrett frowned, checking his watch. "We're not expecting anyone else." The security desk's voice crackled through. "Mr. Blackwell, there's a Donovan Kincaid here. Says he has legal documents for Ms. Calloway that require immediate delivery." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Garrett's expression went from confused to dangerous in the space between heartbeats. "Tell him to schedule through her attorney. He says if you refuse access, he'll serve the papers in the lobby with media present. Building cameras would record everything." Nora stood, hands clenched. "Let him come up." "Nora, I'm done hiding from him, and I won't let him hold your building's reputation hostage. Send him up." Garrett's jaw worked, weighing options before he spoke into the intercom with deadly calm. "Send him up. Lily, go to your room." "But Daddy, now Dragon, this is adult business." Lily looked between them, reading danger in postures before reluctantly heading toward her bedroom. Eleanor followed, hand on the child's shoulder. The penthouse fell silent except for the mechanical hum of the elevator ascending. Donovan Kincaid stepped out 2 minutes later, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. 35, conventionally handsome in the way money could buy, with cold eyes that assessed the room before landing on Nora. His smile held no warmth. "There you are. My legal team has been trying to locate you for 2 weeks. New apartment, no forwarding address, very inconvenient." "That was intentional." Nora's voice came out steadier than she felt. "What do you want?" He pulled papers from his briefcase, setting them on the coffee table with theatrical precision. "Lawsuit for defamation, $10 million in damages. You've destroyed my reputation, tanked my company's valuation, and cost me my engagement. Time to pay for your lies." "They're not lies. 7 women have given testimony. 7 bitter exes who signed NDAs and chose to break them for attention." Donovan's tone suggested he was explaining simple math to a child. "My lawyers will destroy every single one of you in court, but I'm feeling generous today, so here's the offer: sign a full recantation, publicly apologize for fabricating abuse allegations, and I'll drop to a $2 million settlement. You have 72 hours. Garrett moved between them, voice carrying the kind of controlled fury that made boardrooms fall silent. "Get out of my home." "This doesn't concern you, Blackwell. Though I have to admire the strategy, playing white knight to a damsel, getting your name in papers as the hero. Good PR for your firm. I said get out. Or what? You'll have security remove me. With what cause? I'm here delivering legal documents completely within my rights." Donovan turned back to Nora, all pretense of civility dropping away. "You really thought you'd win this? You were a waitress I took pity on. Nobody before me, nobody after. I gave you everything, and you repay me with lies that might cost me everything I've built." The words landed like physical blows designed to reduce Nora back to the woman who'd believed she deserved freezing to death in an alley. She felt herself shrinking, old programming kicking in, Donovan's voice overlaying months of newer truths. Then Lily's voice cut through the tension, high and furious. "You're a liar!" Everyone turned. Lily stood in the hallway, Eleanor behind her, looking apologetic but not surprised. The child marched forward with righteous anger that made her seem much older than 7. "You left her in the cold to die. Daddy found her and she was almost dead, and you did that. Lily, sweetheart, this isn't—" Garrett reached for her. She dodged his hand, positioning herself between Nora and Donovan with protective fury. "She's not nobody. She's Nora, and she's wonderful, and she makes Daddy happy, and she taught me about being brave. You're the bad one. You're mean, and you hurt people, and I hope you go to jail forever." Donovan stared at the child with something like shock, unprepared for this particular defense. He opened his mouth to respond just as the elevator chimed again. Sutton Hargrove stepped out carrying a leather portfolio and USB drive, flanked by a woman in a severe suit who radiated legal authority. Sutton's polished exterior showed cracks around the edges, exhaustion visible in ways makeup couldn't hide. "Donovan," her voice could have frozen water, "we need to talk." "Sutton, what are you doing here?" "What I should have done 3 weeks ago when I broke our engagement." She crossed to the coffee table, setting down the USB drive with the finality of evidence. "Everything's here. Every fraudulent user report, every shell company, every fake partnership you used to inflate Kincaid Tech's valuation. My father's forensic accountants found it all." Donovan's face went white. "You signed an NDA, which is void when covering criminal activity. My lawyers confirmed that extensively." She glanced at Nora with something like kinship. "He told me the same things he told you, that I should be grateful for his attention, that I wasn't sophisticated enough for his world, that he was doing me a favor by tolerating my flaws." The woman beside Sutton stepped forward, producing credentials. "Special Agent Chen, FBI. Mr. Kincaid, you're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering." 2 more agents emerged from the elevator, moving with practiced efficiency. Donovan backed up, hands raised in automatic surrender, even as his mouth worked through denial. "This is insane. You can't just—" "I have rights. My lawyers will—" "Your lawyers are already being contacted." Agent Chen's tone suggested she'd done this many times. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." They cuffed him with clinical precision, reading rights while Donovan oscillated between rage and panic. Nora watched the man who'd defined 3 years of her life, who'd tried to erase her, reduced to handcuffs and Miranda warnings. She expected triumph. Instead, she felt something closer to relief, like pressure releasing from a wound she'd been protecting for too long. Lily pressed against her side, small hand finding hers. The bad guy always loses in the end. Donovan caught Nora's eyes as agents led him toward the elevator, desperation breaking through his control. "This is your fault. If you'd just stayed gone, if you'd just accepted that you were nothing." "I was never nothing." Her voice carried across the room with absolute certainty. "You just needed me to believe that so you could control me. But I survived you, and now everyone knows what you really are." The elevator doors closed on whatever response he'd planned. Silence settled over the penthouse, heavy with aftermath. Agent Chen turned to Nora, expression softening slightly. "We'll need your testimony for trial. All 7 victims with the financial crimes and Ms. Hargrove's evidence. We're looking at 15 to 20 years federal prison." "I'll testify." Nora's hand tightened on Lily's. "Whatever it takes." After the agents left, after Sutton departed with quiet thanks and promises to stay in touch after Eleanor had diplomatically retreated to her quarters, 3 people remained in the living room, surrounded by birthday wreckage and the ghost of confrontation. Lily yawned, adrenaline fading into exhaustion. Garrett scooped her up despite protests. Bed, dragon. You've been very brave today, but even dragons need rest. Will Nora be here when I wake up? The question hung in the air, simple and impossible. Nora met Garrett's eyes over his daughter's head, seeing her own uncertainty reflected back. Yes. The word came out before doubt could stop it. I'll be here. Lily mumbled something that sounded like victory before sleep claimed her entirely. Garrett carried her away, leaving Nora alone with the debris of the day, wrapping paper, the lawsuit papers. Donovan had abandoned, the storybook still open to its final page. She picked up the book, studying her own watercolors. The girl who thought she was nobody stood surrounded by stars, face turned upward, finally believing her own worth. It had taken 7 weeks, 1 near-death experience, 4 other women's courage, and a child's fierce defense to get here. But she'd arrived. Garrett returned, moving to the windows that framed the darkening city. Snow had started falling, fat flakes that caught light and made the view look painted. You don't have to stay just because you told Lily you would. I know, but maybe I want to stay for other reasons. Like what? Nora joined him at the window, watching snow accumulate on the park below. Like the fact that I spent 2 weeks trying to convince myself I was protecting you both by leaving. But really, I was just scared of caring about people who might leave, scared of belonging somewhere and losing it, scared of being the kind of person who needs help. Needing help isn't weakness. I know that now, intellectually. Getting my heart to believe it is harder. They stood side by side, not touching, watching the city transform. Garrett's reflection in the glass showed the carefully neutral expression he wore during negotiations. I need to tell you something. When I found you on Christmas Eve, part of me wanted revenge. Nora turned to look at him directly. Revenge. On Donovan. He and I crossed paths at Harvard. He cheated on a final exam. I reported him. He never forgave me. When I saw that note with his initials, I thought... He stopped, choosing words carefully. I thought it was an opportunity. Help you destroy him, solve both problems at once. But then you became real, not a chess piece in some petty grudge, but a person. Someone who made Lily laugh, who challenged me in meetings, who fought back instead of staying broken, and I realized I didn't want revenge anymore. I just wanted you to be okay. Am I okay? I think you're getting there, but Nora... He finally turned to face her fully. I fell in love with you somewhere between Christmas and now. I tried not to. Told myself it was proximity or white knight syndrome or anything except what it actually was. But watching you leave 2 weeks ago, seeing Lily's heartbreak, living in this apartment without your presence, I can't pretend anymore. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they felt like something she'd been waiting to hear without knowing she was waiting. I love you too. I think I started loving you the night you stopped your car when everyone else drove past. And I definitely loved you by the time you let your daughter give me her favorite blanket. But I didn't know if what I felt was real or just gratitude dressed up as something else. And now I know the difference. Gratitude is what I feel when I think about you saving my life. Love is what I feel when I imagine not having you in it. Garrett closed the distance between them, hands finding her face with a gentleness that made her throat tight. He kissed her like he'd been holding back for weeks, which he had. Nora kissed him back with everything she'd been too scared to feel, letting herself believe this was real, was possible, was hers to have. When they broke apart, snow was falling harder outside, coating the city in white perfection. Garrett rested his forehead against hers, breathing like he'd run a marathon. Stay, not in the guest room, not as someone we're helping. Stay as part of this family. I'm still nobody's girl. But she was smiling when she said it. I don't belong to anyone but myself. Good. I don't want someone who belongs to me. I want someone who chooses me. Every day. The way I choose you. 6 months later, August heat turned Manhattan into something between sauna and griddle. Nora stood on a stage in Central Park, microphone in hand, looking out at 200 faces gathered for the launch of Lily's Light Foundation. The fund had started as Garrett's suggestion, grown through months of planning, and emerged as something entirely hers: $5 million dedicated to survivors of domestic abuse. Emergency housing, job training, legal advocacy, therapy. Everything she'd needed and hadn't had, now available to women whose stories echoed her own. 6 months ago, she spoke into the microphone, voice steady despite nerves. Someone decided I was nobody's girl. He took everything and left me to die, but I survived. And in surviving, I learned that being nobody's doesn't mean being nothing. It means being your own. And that's the most powerful thing any of us can be. The crowd applauded. Lily sat in the front row between Garrett and Eleanor, wearing a special dress for the occasion, beaming with pride. Nora had moved back into the penthouse in March, officially with her own key and her name on the lease. She'd started working at Blackwell Capital as Director of Social Impact. A real position with real salary and real responsibilities. She testified at Donovan's trial in June, watched him convicted on 14 counts, sentenced to 15 years federal prison. But none of that compared to the moment, now standing in front of people who believed in second chances, launching something that would help others find their own strength. After the speeches and the photographs and the networking that made her exhausted, they returned to the penthouse. Lily was vibrating with sugar and excitement from the reception, talking non-stop about the reporters and the fancy people and the way Nora had looked like a movie star on stage. You were so brave, everyone was listening, and you weren't even scared. I was terrified, but I did it anyway. That's what brave means. Lily's wisdom delivered with 7-year-old certainty. Garrett had been quiet through most of the evening, watching Nora with an expression she couldn't quite read. After Lily finally crashed, overstimulated and exhausted, he found Nora on the balcony overlooking the park. I have something for you. He held out a box, small and familiar. The snow globe Lily had given her on Christmas morning, the one that had traveled from guest room to apartment to bedroom and back again. Nora took it confused. I already have this. Look inside. She shook the globe, watching snow swirl. Something glinted among the flakes, catching light. A ring suspended in liquid and artificial weather, spinning slowly as snow settled around it. Garrett took the globe back, somehow extracting the ring without making a mess, and dropped to one knee on their balcony 72 floors above the city. I found you in the snow. You brought light into darkness. You taught my daughter that brave means being scared and doing the hard thing anyway. You taught me that second chances aren't just possible, but necessary. His voice cracked slightly. I don't want another day without you. Will you marry me? Nora looked at this man who'd stopped his car on Christmas Eve, who'd fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself, who'd fallen in love with the person she was becoming instead of the person she'd been. She thought about the note that had defined her as nobody's girl and how wrong those words had been. Yes. She pulled him up, kissing him before the ring was even on her finger. 1,000 times yes. Lily's shriek came from inside. She said, yes, I win the bet with Uncle Wyatt. They both laughed. Garrett sliding the ring onto Nora's finger while his daughter celebrated victory through a bedroom door she'd clearly been listening behind. December 24th arrived with snow that transformed the city into the same winter postcard it had been 1 year earlier. Nora stood in City Hall wearing a simple white dress, not the elaborate gown. Magazines insisted brides needed holding a bouquet Lily had insisted on arranging personally. 20 people filled the small room: Wyatt, Eleanor, Roman, Claudia, Dr. Sterling, the other women who'd testified against Donovan Meredith. Tessa Isla had become something like friends. Sutton Hargrove sat in the back row, recovery written in the steadiness of her gaze. Lily served as flower girl, carrying not one bouquet but 2 fresh flowers for Nora, dried flowers she'd later scatter in the park for her mother. The gesture made everyone cry. Eleanor openly, Garrett with his jaw tight against emotion. The ceremony was brief, vows simple. Garrett promised to stop when she needed saving, to step back when she needed to save herself. Nora promised to choose him every day, even when running felt safer. Lily inserted her own vow, loudly declaring that she was part of this and everyone had better remember it. After signatures and photographs and rice thrown on City Hall steps, they returned to the penthouse for dinner. Small and perfect, just family. Eleanor had prepared Catherine's favorite meal, a gesture that honored memory without being haunted by it. Evening found them at the windows where Nora had first watched snow fall while believing she was nobody. Garrett's arms wrapped around her from behind. Lily pressed between them, holding Rudy and yawning despite insisting she wasn't tired. Tell the story again. Lily's request familiar as breathing now. Nora began, voice soft. Once upon a time there was a girl who thought she was nobody. Garrett continued, until a dragon named Lily taught her she was somebody special. Lily finished, eyes drooping. And they learned that family isn't who you start with. It's who chooses to stay, the end. That's my favorite story, Lily mumbled, already half asleep. Mine too, Nora whispered, watching snow fall on their city, their life, their imperfect and perfect family. The note still existed, locked away as evidence in a federal facility. Sometimes Nora thought about it, those words that had tried to define her nobody's girl. But they'd been wrong. She'd never been nobody's, she'd always been her own. And being her own was exactly what allowed her to choose belonging, to choose love, to choose the family that had formed around a chance encounter on the coldest night of the year. Snow continued falling, covering everything in white possibility, and Nora Blackwell, no longer Calloway, no longer nobodies, held the people who'd taught her that home wasn't a place, it was people who chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. People who saw value where the world insisted there was none. People who stopped when everyone else drove past. Lily fell completely asleep, small body going heavy with trust. Garrett kissed Nora's temple, no words necessary. They stood together in the window's frame, 3 people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen light, watching their city prepare for another year of possibilities. The inscription on the snow globe, visible on the shelf where it now lived permanently, caught lamplight one final time. Home is where you belong. And Nora finally completely belonged.